Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, the show for women who are seeking more fulfillment in life and simply not getting it from their current situation. We focus specifically on careers, but hey, we spend a lot of time in our careers, so making changes here will definitely create an impact in your overall happiness. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and my mission is to empower women to succeed. I believe that in order to powerfully own your career, you must decide and claim that you want to sit in the driver's seat. You must know that you deserve better and be willing to not only do the requisite work, but be willing to go out on a limb to ensure your success. Each episode focuses on profiling a leader who is clearly demonstrating ownership of their career. Join me and my guests as we explore career journeys and bring you actionable strategies to use to get into the driver's seat for your career. Because ultimately, your career is your responsibility. Let's get into the show. Hi there, it's Simone Morris, host of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. How's everybody doing? I really hope well. Honestly, 2020 has been something else, hasn't it? My goodness, I am hard-pressed to believe that we're in June based on the amount of activity that has been happening in 2020 with the coronavirus and the current challenges with racial inequality. It has just been a 2020. I know you're hard-pressed to think about your career, but I do want to say you still have to think about your career. I did a video earlier this week on my Instagram page, and I was talking about the fact that we do, in fact, need to treat our careers like going to the gym where we are working out consistently to get results. Well, you have to treat your career that way in terms of lifting weights. To build the muscle, build your career muscle, you've got to take some action to move your career forward. And so you have my commitment to continue to move this podcast forward because we need it. We need to hear stories of inspiration of people taking courageous actions to move their careers forward. We need to hear the stories that make us laugh because we do need some laughs during this time. And so I am honored to have different guests join me each week and share their messages of, number one, what is their career for owning their career? Two, how they handle risk in their career. And three, what advice would they give to you in moving forward in your career? Yesterday was Father's Day, and so I did take a time out to be with family. And so you have my apologies for a delay in release, but I didn't want to leave it too long for sending this message out to you as well as this week's episode. This week I sit down with Keithline Byrne and we talk about, careers and her journey. It's a delightful conversation. I think that you'll enjoy her story and her message. So that's the episode that's coming up, and I will be sure to share Ellen's contact information so you can stay connected with her. In the meantime, I want to ask you three things. The first thing is to really, one, help me to continue the conversation. After each podcast episode, I have a LinkedIn group that's called the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. And in there is where I want to continue the conversation, continue the learning about the episode that you just listened to. And I will start a thread for each episode where I'm inviting the guests to join the group as well so that they can respond to the questions that you ask about their episodes and you can stay connected. So I want to deepen the learning post-podcast because, of course, we listen and internalize things, but when we go to put things into play, we may have some questions. So I created that space for you to do just that, to continue the conversation after the podcast. So if you haven't done so, please do go to LinkedIn and connect to that group, the Power of Owning Your Podcast group, and continue the conversation. That's one. Number two is, if you haven't given a review for the podcast, I really would like to ask you to do so. We are on season 3, and we've completed 3 seasons. I'm sorry about that. We've completed 3 seasons, and I'd love for you to give the podcast a 5-star rating so that we can elevate the visibility of the podcast, get in there so people know that this podcast exists and they know that it's a useful resource for soaring in their careers. So I'd like to ask you to leave a review if you haven't yet done so. And 3, I'd like to ask you to take care of yourself. Take care of yourself during this time because it is heavy what's happening in the world. Heavy, and so, sometimes when we experience heaviness, we go inward to heal. And while I completely agree with taking care of yourself and healing, please also don't stay in. Be sure to pour out your expertise, show the world what you're made of, and also take this opportunity to continue to pour into yourself so that you can move forward in your career. Pick up new knowledge. I know personally I have been in learning, in a sea of learning. Just there's so many opportunities available. I'm learning, I'm listening to podcasts just like you are. So, be good to yourself and continue to soar. And most of all, continue to be in the driver's seat for your career. On to this week's episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. As always, we have fabulous, fabulous guests, and this week is no exception. I have with me today someone who I consider a dear friend and who I respect greatly, Keithline Byrne. Ellen is one of the co-founders of Her New Standard, a women's leadership development program, and she's also an executive coach, a social scientist. I've had her at the Power of Owning Your Career workshop, and she's in the driver's seat for her career, everybody. So Ellen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Simone. It's such a pleasure to be here. After hearing so many of your amazing podcasts, I feel so honored to be with you today.
Awesome. Well, our listeners are in for our treat. Ellen, tell us when you realized that you were in the driver's seat for your career.
Simone, I have to say it took me longer than I'd like to admit, but I would say it wasn't until I was in my mid-40s. I am now in my mid-50s, so early 40s, I'd say, when I really was able to make the connection between feeling responsible as a mom and a caretaker and as a real professional woman, and being able to find that balance. I struggled with it for so long, and until I got to that point in my 40s when I said, nope, I think I got to figure it out.
Awesome. Okay, so what is the secret sauce then? Let's jump right to it.
Well, I think the secret sauce is it's looking back. When you're at a certain point in your life, you can so easily look back and see the connections in your life and how your story makes sense. But at the time, it doesn't. And so it might not give you that same confidence. And so when I was able to, at the stage of 40s, of self-reflection, of really stepping back and going, who am I and who do I really, really want to be? And giving myself permission to do that, all of a sudden I said, aha, now I can see my dreams in high school actually are woven through my entire career, and now into my 50s are very, very clearly evident. And it's exciting to see. All the dots are connecting, and it's really cool.
I think that's so interesting, and I've heard other guests say that, and I think it's true because I remember growing up and I told my mom I wanted to be a teacher, and she said, there's really no money in that. Why do you want to do that? And so I veered off course from being a teacher. And to your point of the dots connecting and weaving between, today I teach for a living just in a different way than when I said it many, many years ago. So absolutely.
Yeah, you found your path to teaching. Yeah, in your unique way. Absolutely. And I feel like I did the same thing. I wanted to be a psychologist and started college and in psychology, and realized the psychology department wasn't very strong, but this business school was very strong, and they gave really great co-ops. And since I was paying for my own way through college, I said, oh, wait a minute, I'm missing something here. So I switched over. And I loved the business side and I was good at it, but it wasn't necessarily where my heart was. So now I can look so many years later and say, oh, now I'm connecting business and psychology together. And it makes complete sense. But at the time, they're like, you're going from psychology to business to finance? Really? So yes, I see it exactly.
All right. Well, I think that advice to our listeners says not to worry if you're detouring, because it'll all come together. Eventually, you will gain the clarity that you seek, in terms of getting clarity and connected to your heart. Because as you told your story, I thought about getting connected to my heart as well. And when did you decide to listen to your heart?
See, now that's the magic sauce, right? You keep trying, and it was really the shift of going from what you think you're supposed to do to what really drives you, and being able to not force something, but to say, okay, if I listen closely enough and I really start to pay attention to my inner self, there is so much wisdom there. Instead of just saying, no, but I'm supposed to be doing this other thing. I'm supposed to be, the mom, super mom, and I'm supposed to be handling the career at the same time and balancing it all and, doing both beautifully. However, not really being fulfilled in the career at all because you're just doing what you're supposed to do. But when you can stop, and it took me until there was this magical moment where there's an institute up in Rhinebeck, New York. And actually, right before we got on this call, I noticed they had this free webinar from my most famous person, Elizabeth Lesser. And I was maybe 37 or 38. And I remember getting this catalog in the mail, and I look at it and I read this woman who I've never heard of, her bio and her workshop she's going to have for the weekend. And
Is this Omega?
It's the Omega Institute. And it's about spirituality, and it's not religious at all. It wasn't a religious thing at all. And for some reason, I told my husband, and my kids were still pretty young at the time. I said, I really want to go. And he said, yeah, all right, fine, go. And I had felt like I hadn't been out for a weekend without a group of girls or on my own for a very long time. So I drive up to this very dark place up in Rhinebeck, New York, and it's dark at night. And somebody says, welcome to Omega, in some like sort of real earthy, crunchy way. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? Mm-hmm. This is like way out there. And fast forward 3.5 days, I drove home feeling this sense of peace that I had never experienced in my entire life. She taught me how to meditate. She taught us like really going deep in and journaling about what you really want and how it connects to your soul. And by the time I got home, I was just on cloud 9. And I realized that I had hit something that I had never hit before. And I never wanted that to leave, ever. So I have made it my mission to keep a sense of that connected, that inner connection to that wisdom, a part of who I am. I didn't intend to tell you this story. It just sort of, you just asked the right question, I guess. But that particular time was like, oh my God, there's this reservoir in there that I never really knew inside. And if I can tap into it, it's my guide. Now, every spiritual teacher will tell you that, but for some reason, it didn't really hit me until that moment.
I think when the time is right, we hear the messages. Yeah. And what I want to ask you next is, you heard that message at the right time and you went back to your life. Oftentimes people get this wisdom, this encouragement, they go back to their everyday life. But you took that information and you made changes on your roadmap in the driver's seat. So talk to us about who you needed to be, what you needed to do to take action after you came out of that environment back into your environment?
That's such a good question, because that stirred me to think about. The very next week that I came back from that, I was getting a master's in counseling, and I was going to have an exam was scheduled for that next week. And I was still on this cloud nine of peace and just letting things flow. And oh my gosh, so good. I had never before walked into a test not nearly as prepared as I should have. And I think I got a C- on the test or something, which I was like, I've never seen one of these before. So I realized that, yeah, you can be so relaxed and mellow, but there's an element of stress that actually helps you, that you stress, that need to kind of get jazzed up. So I'm telling you this because what ended up transpiring after that is trying to find the balance of when you need that drive and that go, 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 because it's really leading you towards something that's important. And then when do you need that sense of calm and peace and connected to the inside? So it's like that constant balance, and it can go one way and you can feel you're getting tippy this way, and then you feel like you're getting tipped the other way. And for instance, right now we're COVID-19. It's like, okay, we're in this adrenaline, go, 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 go. And then, okay, wait a minute, hold on. Got to slow down. Get that sense of calmness going. Turn all the devices off. Connect to the inside. What's the message? What's my learning?
Beautiful, and so appropriate for the times that we're in. So Ellen, on that journey, you had to take some risk. How did you approach taking risk to create shifts in your career?
Well, I think, you asked that question, and I think I was a chicken for a long, long time. I mean, I did take lots of pivots to try different things because I knew that I wasn't growing at a certain point in time. I wasn't being challenged. My one big message is when you start to get that instinct, it's time to take on more responsibility in the organization or to try on a new stretch assignment. And when I didn't have those available to me, I would need to go back to school or I need to learn something. But I didn't really do it in a very bold way until I was in my 40s. And so when I look back, I was like, I kind of think I was a chicken. So I think the risk taking, and I finally went back and got a doctorate in my late 40s. And I remember when I flew out to California where I was taking the class, on my way out there, I started having these really like, what am I doing? This is insanity. I'm late 40s. Who gets a doctorate in your late 40s? You don't need this. This is silly. And every question ever came up in my mind. And I realized this fear is exactly what needed to happen to me. I needed to address this fear. I had been holding on to this want of this degree for so long, and this challenge of my critical thinking skills that I was saying, can you do it? Can you do it? I don't know. Maybe you can't do it, and I needed that push. And I was so happy to fight through it. And I think that before that, I was being a chicken, that I was afraid of that fear of questioning too much.
A couple things are coming up for me. One is the financial model with your risk appetite, and how usually more risk is taken early in the game. The further away you are apart from retirement, you take more risk. So it's interesting that you're talking about post 40s and retirement. And then what came up for me when you were saying, I guess I was a chicken, I was saying to myself, but you're not dying with your music inside of you. Mm-hmm. So it's never too late to go after your dreams. And I was thinking, how beautiful is that you did it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is so true. The regret thing, I feel like I know for sure that I'm not going to die with a regret. I will, conquer it, everything that I want to, or at least attempt it and put all my all into it. But it's so easy as a younger person, at least I found, to be driven by, it's a necessity. You're making really good money. Why would I leave this corporate job when they've got great benefits and I have a family to feed and I'm the breadwinner? You leave that at this stage of the game. So making those decisions at the time that I was able to go to the doctorate, I had a little more financial stability. So I was able to do that. Much harder to do it when you have a young family and you're the breadwinner.
Sure. So what advice would you give to someone wanting to own their career?
When I heard you asking other podcast people that, and my biggest advice is to listen, to be really aware of what's going on inside of you. And I know that we live such incredibly busy lives that we so infrequently take the time to be self-reflective. And so you have to really get that system down, whatever works for you. For me, it's meditation and yoga and journaling. And in different stages of the year, I do different things depending on what the calling is, so that I can really hear what's going on. Because then it's being patient. Because whenever I tried to force the world to be my way, oh boy, it just did not work out. But when I was patient and I allowed it to flow and I listened attentively, wow, the magic happened.
That can be so hard to do. I love that you talked about how you do it with the yoga, meditation, and journaling. Anything else that has come across your path that you can share in terms of resource for others wanting to get clarity in their careers?
Yeah, in their career, that really is the fundamental one. I do think that there are a lot of, for me, the retreat of the one I mentioned, Omega or Kripalu, and there's a bunch of others, I needed to physically remove myself from my environment at that time, was really helpful so that I could really see clearly. So I think that's, at times, if it fits the budget and the time, it's really powerful.
Absolutely. I have done both. I've gone up to Omega and I've also gone to Kripalu, and it's quite an experience just to, as you're saying, be out of your environment. What's coming up for me right now is that you've got to give yourself time to think, to listen to yourself, what it is that you truly want. And oftentimes we're just busy, the hamster wheel or whatever, we don't get time to do that. And I'm finding with this disruption that it's not all bad, that it's giving me time to slow down, to innovate, to collaborate, to think, just so many different benefits that it doesn't seem like there is a benefit to slowing down, but there really is.
Absolutely. 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 It is a gift of all gifts when you can look at it from that perspective. It's so important.
So now sorry, go ahead.
You know what I think the thing is, it's giving yourself permission to do it, which I think, we have learned that the value is so important, but we often don't put it as a priority.
I have so many titles going through my head, Ellen, for your episode. I started out with the after 40 comment. And then I thought, be patient and listen to yourself. And then I'm like, give yourself grace. There's lots of time in my head. But if you could think about your body of work, and if you had to name the book, what would it be?
I think be patient and listen attentively, because Yeah, but then it leads to flow. So I don't know, you're better at titling things, I have to say. But yeah, all of the things that you mentioned are phenomenal. So whatever you think is good, Simone.
Okay. I'll glean it when I listen back to this interview. But let me go back to risk for a moment and say you were a solopreneur for a while, but now you are running a company with two other leaders, and that was a risk in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us about continuing to take risk and driving in your career.
Yeah, well, you know what it is, Simone? It's like all the stars aligned when I met Karen and Denise, my two business partners, and I have such incredible respect for those two women, and I appreciate their behavioral styles are different than mine, which complements mine, and I, in so many ways, know that I need them in order to really fully explore this business idea, and I'm committed to making this work in every way possible. So it's one of those things where this is what all the other dots have led to. And so I feel like it's not really a risk. It's almost like it just feels so right that I can't stop.
Wonderful. I love how the dots keep coming back through this conversation, how it's re-emphasized. Well, as we begin to wrap up, can you tell our listeners about any resources, books that you would recommend in terms of owning your career?
Let's see. You know what? The ones that are coming to my mind are by Donna Markova, and it's something about how not to live an unlived life. And it's just one of those really, really incredible books that have so many questions that when you can stop and really reflect on them, help to guide you to where you, the direction that you really want to be from a soul place. And then one that's not directly related to a career, but I truly believe that every woman should read it every decade. And that's A Gift from the Sea by Anne McMorrow Lindbergh. Anne McMorrow Lindbergh. And it's a short, little, tiny, very mini chapters, but it takes you inside to what really matters. Another one of those sort of more spiritual books, yet they probably are not called spiritual books. I'm calling them that.
Nice. Thank you for those resources. We get a ton of resources, and I'll be sure to put it in the show notes for our listeners writing down their notes at the moment. Ellen, thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It's been such a pleasure learning more of your career story. Please tell our listeners how they can stay in contact with you after this episode.
Sure. They could email me at ellen@hernewstandard.com. It's hernewstandard.com.
Wonderful.
And I look forward to hearing from them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Simone.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It is my hope that you enjoyed today's episode. You can check out the show notes for this episode on the SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org website by clicking the podcast menu. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and tell a friend or two about it.